Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Luigi's Mansion is a bit of an odd duck of a game, isn't it? It came out right in the adolescence of the Mario series, when it was still experimenting with different looks and feels, and slowly defining what it meant to truly be a Mario game. From the very beginning, we've seen Mario grow up to be featured in all sorts of different games and genres and even art styles. The guy's been in platformers, racing games, RPGs, golf, tennis, boxing, teaching, animal poaching. He did it all before the turn of the millennium. So you know a game's gotta be pretty bizarre to be considered the weird one out of that list. What if there was a survival horror Mario game? And it was actually about Luigi.
Oh yeah.
Not to go all Nintendo tuber on you here and whine about how boring modern Mario games are, but with how comparatively safe the series is now in retaining its perfect image and brand identity, I'm honestly not entirely sure we would have gotten a game as strange as Luigi's Mansion had it not been for Nintendo's weird little experimental phase before the late 2000s and early 2010s. At least, not until very recently. The original Luigi's Mansion is often spoken of as this mysterious, overlooked cult classic hidden deep in the GameCube's library that nobody seems to talk about. There's always been kind of a weird funk to the original Luigi's Mansion, and I'm not just talking about the music, although it is very... oh yeah, that's funky. I have a bit of a fun relationship with this game. I rented it as a kid because it had Luigi, and Luigi's awesome, but I felt kind of gypped by the fact that the game wasn't a platformer. Like, Luigi is the Mario brother with the higher jump. I don't think it was that unreasonable of an expectation, but I just didn't really have a developed enough brain to see what they were going for, so I didn't actually make it very far. But as I got a little older in the late 2000s, I started watching Let's Plays of this game and read all sorts of other info about it on walkthroughs and forums and wikis. And that was how I sort of vicariously experienced Luigi's Mansion back then. I was somehow a huge fan of a game that I never even played. Asterisk there. I knew so much about this game that I only barely touched myself, which gave it this ethereal, mysterious quality, almost as if it was just a weird dream that I had, especially since it was so bizarre and niche to begin with. I didn't play the original Luigi's Mansion for myself until just a few years ago actually, well after the release of the third game. I loved both of the sequels and wanted to see if the original could live up to them, if it was as good as I made it out to be in my head, if it was as good as it looked on video. But before we take a look at the game, I must share an alarming development. The League of Nations has announced that the dastardly King Boo has escaped Professor Egad's laboratory and is currently hunting all Base Sam non-subscribers to turn them into portraits for his collection. Please consider subscribing to the channel today to protect yourself from this dangerous cretin. Thank you. Luigi's Mansion started life as a tech demo shown off at Space World 2000 to demonstrate the power of the GameCube, Nintendo's upcoming home console at the time. Don't know what Space World is? Well, it was basically Nintendo's own little private press conference thing that they held throughout the 90s before E3 really took off. Don't know what E3 is? Please tell me you know what E3 is. I'm not old! 26 is young! These old tech demos are pretty fun to watch looking back. These days you have the Riddler up here trying his hardest to make you care that they're rendering more leaves per gigabyte on this tree in the background, or whatever they're trying to show here. But back then developers were kind of just like, what if our game had lighting? The Luigi's Mansion demo stands out in particular though for two major reasons. A, these are genuinely just some really impressive graphical effects for the time. And B, look at Luigi's face, dude. What are these goofy ass cutscenes? They're not even in the final game. The game was eventually expanded upon and developed as a fully fledged adventure shortly after. A little over a year later, it came out as a launch title for the GameCube in November of 2001 here in the States. Just barely missing that perfect October Halloween spooky time release. Oh well. It ended up selling decently well throughout its lifespan. I mean, fifth best-selling GameCube game is nothing to sneeze at. But if we look at it in comparison to past Mario launch titles, these sold gangbusters. People bought systems at launch specifically just to play the new Mario game. And Luigi's Mansion just didn't have that same widespread appeal. I think this is probably the main reason the game has that sort of cult classic reputation. Practically anything is going to look niche if you compare it to Super Mario 64. And also the fact that it took Nintendo so long to follow up on it outside of references and Easter eggs. For a few years there, it really was like, oh hey, remember Luigi's Mansion? That really short game that they made mostly to show off particle effects and dust and shit? Yeah, that was a weird game. Anyway, back to Mario Galaxy. It seems a bit silly that people would still consider Luigi's Mansion to be this sort of unknown hidden gem, given how popular the series is today, and just the popularity of Luigi's character in general. Luigi gets tons of love. He even had his own year, for crying out loud. Oh, wait. While I think it'd be incorrect to say the Luigi's Mansion franchise is overlooked, given how popular the two next level games are, especially 3. It's not entirely untrue for the first game, despite its sales figures. Again, it took over a decade for that first sequel to come out in the first place, and both games are quite different from the first when it comes to tone and aesthetics, let alone how different it is from a standard Mario game. So for today's little Halloween special, I wanted to take a quick look at Luigi's Mansion and see what makes it stand out from the crowd, and even how it eventually became one of my favorite GameCube games as a whole. Luigi's Mansion wastes no time jumping straight into the action. We get a brief cutscene of our fellow Green Boy making his way to his titular Green Boy mansion, and he appears to be mildly perturbed by the circumstances. Man, this shot of Luigi peeking through the mansion's front doors for the first time is just absolutely iconic. It's the first thing I picture whenever I think of this game. It's just creepy enough to do a great job setting the mood to explore this haunted house, while at the same time highlighting the absurdity of the whole situation, with Luigi's goofy mug slowly taking the spotlight. This game's weird, I don't know if I really made that very clear. So we know how Luigi got to the mansion, but that begs the question, why Luigi got to the mansion? Well, it turns out that he won it in a contest that he didn't even enter, and he got catfished. He invited Mario to come celebrate, but he's nowhere to be seen once Luigi arrives. The game doesn't directly reference the story too often, just here and there in character dialogue, so thankfully the game has a key mechanic in place to make sure players don't forget their primary objective.
Mario!
Oh, thank goodness, I almost forgot. The GameCube controller has a ginormous A button that most developers would opt to make the most important action in the game, like jumping or attacking. But I guess the Luigi's Mansion developers had something else in mind and really just needed a big fat Mario button as a reminder of what game series we're playing. This is also the interact button, so there are plenty of times where the player will accidentally call out for Mario while they're trying to inspect things and rummage through furniture and stuff. I'm not complaining, by the way, even though it probably sounds like I am. I think this is hilarious.
Mario!
The inside of the mansion itself is very creepy. The lack of music, the thunder rolling in the background, the dust covering everything, showing how abandoned and dilapidated the place is. For another iconic scene, anytime Luigi interacts with a door, we get a really detailed close-up of his arm jiggling the doorknob or twisting the key, that honestly still looks pretty good to this day. For the standards of a Mario game, all of this is really unsettling and lays a great foundation to build upon for a creepy, spooky adventure. Okay, any possible semblance of this game being even remotely close to scary goes right out the window as soon as we first meet Professor Egad. Yeah, obviously this isn't a horror game, it's more of an action puzzle adventure type deal. But try explaining that to a kid that wanted nothing to do with anything less colorful than this. Luigi and Egad escape the mansion and eventually deduce that King Boo and his legion of regular non-King Boos released Egad's collection of portrait ghosts and plotted to kidnap Mario and Luigi by tricking them with the whole fake mansion sweepstake. The ethics of Egad hunting tortured spirits for sport aside, it's also revealed that the entire mansion is one of King Boo's illusions and only appeared out of nowhere just a few days prior, which I feel kind of cheapens the story a bit and makes the mansion as a concept less interesting. Haunted houses are the scariest when they have a bit of legacy or urban legend to them. Like, oh, don't go to Old Uncle Grimley's. That's where he lost the pool world championship to Slim Bankshot. Ooh. You know, something like that. So, you believe this mansion actually exists then? Strange. Yeah, I do, because we were just there like 15 seconds ago. Whatever, it's not a horror game, literally none of this matters. Alright, we're not afraid of the mansion, but the same can't be said for Luigi himself. A big part of the appeal for this game is getting to see Luigi's reactions to the environment around him. He has this like perpetual face. He quakes in his boots. His walking animation is this stiff and awkward shuffle. He jolts at the tiniest noises. We can even hear him hum the main theme of the game as he explores the dark rooms, which I personally like to interpret as Luigi making up the theme himself, and the full orchestrated version being what he imagines it sounding like in his head. Luigi's not exactly known for his bravery, according to the game's manual, but was he really known for much of anything before this game came out? Before this game, basically everyone knew him as Green Mario, playing second fiddle to his brother and mostly being relegated to two-player mode, if he was lucky enough to even be in the game at all. They didn't even know what voice they wanted to give him back then.
Hello, Mario.
Going back and forth between Charles Martinet's signature deeper nasally voice, or just a pitched up Mario. His only starring role before Luigi's Mansion was Mario is missing. No, I'm not even going to entertain that idea. For the first time, we get some insight into Luigi as a character, and how Nintendo differentiates him from Mario. He's timid, hesitant, kind of awkward, but I actually wouldn't call him cowardly. I disagree with the manual here. He's very brave. It takes a lot of courage to face your fears head on, and it's all because he's motivated by his love for his brother. Getting to see Luigi struggle and persevere through his fears makes him such a compelling character to watch. It's not a ton, but it helped inform Luigi's personality for future games to help make him such a fan favorite, and gave this game some pathos to complement the slower, more atmospheric gameplay. EGAD entrusts Luigi with his old reliable ghost hunting equipment, the Poltergust 3000 and the Game Boy Horror. Ooh. There's some pretty obvious connections to Ghostbusters here, sucking up ghosts and all, using modded Nintendo systems. But according to Shigeru Miyamoto, the game actually wasn't inspired by Ghostbusters, and they tried to differentiate it as much as possible so that people wouldn't make that connection as easily. Yeah, sure. I'm guessing the game was actually inspired by Miyamoto's childhood, where he played with vacuum cleaners while exploring the Kyoto forests. Capturing ghosts is done by getting them to reveal their heart, which for most of the common ghosts is just a matter of shining the flashlight on them to briefly stun them, and then quickly sucking them in. I love how it feels like you're really wrangling the ghosts in. I think that's the best way to describe it. The ghosts obviously don't go down without a fight, so you have to keep slamming down on the control stick the opposite direction the ghost is relative to Luigi, so that he can keep his footing and not get knocked around and dragged all over the room. It's like this really violent game of tug of war, and it's so satisfying to be the one in control of the battle, especially when you're in a room with multiple ghosts avoiding their attacks and chaining multiple sucks together, or sucking several at a time. I gotta stop saying suck. There's a pretty decent variety of standard fodder ghosts to suck on, and I love how they're all designed visually. They all look like they're up to no good. We have some regular guys that just kind of punch Luigi, and some bigger variants that have bigger punches and shockwave attacks. There are these sneaky freakies that grab you, these banana eating guys that I always thought looked like garbage bags, just straight up Shy Guys, and even a few others that make up a surprisingly deep enemy list for how short of a game Luigi's Mansion is. None of the ghosts really get too stale. The real meat on this game's bones comes from the portrait ghost, though. The main crux of the game involves going from room to room to battle each portrait ghost to get a key to fight the next portrait ghost to get another key, and so on. We're able to scan them and glean context clues from their surroundings and behavior to figure out how to beat them. Like for example, Lydia makes herself vulnerable when we open the curtains and cause a draft to blow in. Mr. Lugs tries shooting fireballs at us after sucking up all of his food before tiring himself out. And we can sacrifice Mr. Bones to appease Spooky the Pitbull.
Mr. Bones! I really don't feel like solving the riddle!
You need to solve the riddle.
I really love that each portrait ghost varies not just in the method to defeat them, but also in their designs and personalities. They're a key part in what makes this game so weirdly memorable. I even like how scanning them gives you a glimpse into what they're thinking and what their routines are, like how Shivers the Butler has a bit of a crush on Melody the Pianist. And with the mansion being set up as a consistent, interconnected location, it's kind of fun to imagine how they all function in their daily lives as a big extended family. Like a more macabre Meet the Robinsons or something. Actually, capturing the portrait ghosts is what really puts Luigi's Mansion's combat to the test. They all have 100 health, significantly more than any of the basic ghosts, and it's incredibly satisfying to drain all that health in one go without breaking the connection. But I'd be lying if I said I knew how to do it consistently. There's a ton of really subtle nuances to keep in mind when it comes to sucking ghosts. If the ghost wiggles free or causes Luigi to crash into anything, it breaks the streak and does a tiny bit of damage. But I swear there are times where Luigi doesn't smack anything but the air itself, and it still disconnects him. And sometimes it's brain dead easy to launch up in a corner and chunk away all that health with no resistance, while other times Luigi can't get up off the ground no matter what you try to do. The flashlight can also be a bit finicky. The idea is that you're supposed to hit ghosts with the flashlight really close up so the intensity of the light is stronger and they get stunned for longer, and sometimes it just doesn't happen. You can hold the B button to turn the flashlight off so you can get close and not risk them fleeing from a stray edge light while you're turning to face them, which makes it a bit more consistent, but not 100%. On top of that, the game just doesn't really explain any of the optimal strategies. During the tutorial, EGAD constantly explains that pulling back on the control stick will suck the ghost faster, but not much really about repeatedly yanking it back and readjusting to plant your feet and to keep getting that damage bonus. I feel like he could have elaborated on that a bit. Also, where does the C-stick come into play? Literally no mention of it in-game from what I could find, and there doesn't seem to be a general consensus online either. But I swear that twirling the C-stick around makes the ghost easier to catch. And am I supposed to match the direction of the control stick or spin it in circles like a madman? Again, it's weird how little the game tells you how to play it. And I actually really like that. See, Luigi's Mansion is so short and so easy that it can get away with not explaining these more advanced techniques. You can defeat basically any of the portrait ghosts by just holding the stick back normally, even if you take a few hits in the process. Oh, boo-hoo, I can't perfect no-hit Biff Atlas on my first try. Luigi's Mansion is an incredibly replayable game, which, if you're familiar with my channel, is a trait that I value very highly in games. The game even encourages it by keeping track of your high score and best portrait ghost records in EGAD's art gallery, which persists after restarting your save file, even going as far as to track the number of times that you've already beaten the game. The thing about replaying games is that players will be more inclined to mix things up and try new strategies to make each playthrough different and fresh. I think it's really awesome that the game has these hidden techniques to figure out. I like that I can feel myself improving and becoming more consistent every time I replay this game, and that I get the immediate feedback that I am improving by chunking down a really difficult portrait ghost all in one go. I'm a bit inconsistent now, but see where I was just a few playthroughs ago and it's any wonder I even made it through the game at all. This development of skill and immediate feedback is a great way of rewarding its most dedicated players for sticking with the game and playing through it multiple times, and we'll see later on that it goes beyond just mastering its controls. The game's first area is very linear and short, essentially being an extended tutorial after graduating from EGAD's training room. Beating the ghosts and solving the puzzles in each room grants the player a key, which can only be used to open one other specific door within the mansion. This is admittedly kinda lame. A big part of the appeal of the game taking place in this giant mansion is knowing that we can explore every room inside of it, and we'll grow familiar with it as we spend all of our time here pushing further down each hallway and backtracking through friendly territory. It's an open world to explore, but we're not really exploring if our route through the game is so aggressively dictated. I'm not saying that the entire mansion should be open from the rip, but if we could do the rooms in each area in whatever order we wanted, it would have made the mansion a lot more interesting to explore. Area 3 sort of does this, and I'd say it's probably my favorite section in the game because of it. Regardless, at the end of each area is a boss ghost, a bigger, more complex battle than the standard portrait ghosts. After capturing Neville and Lydia at the end of Area 1, all that's left is their infant son Chauncey. Don't worry, he was born as a ghost. Gotta keep that E for everyone rating. I said earlier that this game isn't scary, which is true, if you're pushing 30. Ask 7-year-old Sam, and you have a different story. Why'd they make this damn baby so creepy? I think it was honestly the reason that I quit the game when I was younger. I thought, dude, if the rest of the game is like this, then I want nothing to do with it. Back to Blockbuster, vile hellspawn. Outside of that, Chauncey is actually pretty non-threatening. The player learns about his weakness before even beginning the fight, so it's a no-brainer. But it serves as a good capstone to end the game's intro section. If Luigi's Mansion had the same basic gameplay loop of going room to hunt ghosts and find keys for its entire runtime, it would have gotten stale pretty quick even with its short length, and I don't think it'd be remembered as fondly. Starting relatively early on, the game is consistently adding a few more layers of complexity to make it not quite as repetitive. For instance, we can use the Game Boy Horror to scan the environment. The Game Boy is mainly meant to be used to figure out the weaknesses of the portrait ghosts, but we can also scan certain bits of furniture to get a glimpse into Luigi's psyche. He's a pretty odd guy. I'm willing to bet there's something cold in there. Oh, wow, you don't say. He also just doesn't really like anything either. It's a painting, but I wouldn't call it art. Holy shit, dude. He doesn't like the exercise bike. He doesn't like the swords hanging on the wall. Is there anything that he does like? Oh, the lantern. Well, I'll be. In terms of actual objectives, one mandatory side quest we're given is to collect all of Mario's lost items to bring them to Madame Clairvoya, so she can telekinetically locate him within the mansion. Yeah, that's great and all, but we already know Mario isn't a painting in the basement. We have to see this cutscene before finishing the item hunt quest. Why do we have to see this? Flimsy rationale aside, I do actually really enjoy the hunt for the lost items. Most of the items are in Area 3, which, like I said earlier, is more open-ended in how we can tackle it, and I like that we have to be more thorough in our search, like with Mario's hat being in the washing machine, and having to interact with this really awesome set piece in the observatory, even if aiming the shooting star is a bit wonky. Throughout the game, the Poltergust is also given elemental powers to play with, being fire, water, and ice. Unless it's Pokemon, I usually don't like it when games add these sort of elemental rock, paper, scissors mechanics. It usually just serves to overcomplicate the gameplay and just feels like lazy and uninspired game design to me. There's a few points where Luigi has to fight elemental ghosts, and if he doesn't have the right one to counter it, he's just shit out of luck and has to backtrack to get it. That's annoying. But thankfully, the game also has a few more novel uses for the elements, like being able to light candles to reveal certain ghosts, and watering the plants to get more gems and other treasure. It's fun. It helps redeem the element system a little bit and makes it feel not as pointless. I enjoy how interactive all the different props in the mansion are. But of course, we're also given our most pertinent side quest early on, pretty much right after starting Area 2. Some may even argue that this is actually the main quest. After solving a pretty easy but clever puzzle where we have to press a button hidden on the foreground wall, Luigi inadvertently releases all the boos, now roaming in just about every room across the mansion. Quick side note, I just want to point out that King Boo's design goes unreasonably hard in the Luigi's Mansion series, and I'm always so sad to see him get watered down when he's featured in any other Mario game, just being a regular Boo with a generic crown. Boos are found by turning on the lights in the room and then flushing them out by rummaging through the furniture wherever the radar goes crazy. The mechanics for capturing boos are actually kind of different from all the other ghosts, where you just kind of suck them normally without playing the game of tug of war. This helps make them stand out and feel more special, as they should since capturing enough of them is mandatory to beat the game. The boos are quite devious in terms of both personality and gameplay. Each one has a unique name that's just a really bad boo pun, like Shamboo, Booigi, and 6 o'clock boos. Oh my lord. Oftentimes they'll leave decoys or traps for the player to find, but they're especially weaselly when attempting to capture them. Capturing boos is all about distancing and positioning, being close enough that you're able to suck them, but not so close that they can ram into you and escape the room, which, yes, they can do that, and they'll do it incessantly too. The later boos can have upwards of 300 health, which makes them a huge pain in the ass in the attic and especially the basement. They love to fly in the breaker room, meaning we have to constantly go in and out of this other room where we have to vacuum the dust to flip onto the ceiling to get there and suck like maybe 20 health and then go back through the dust room into the hallway and oh, time to go back again and This is honestly the least fun part of the game. They're worse than the Gamma Metroids and Samus Returns, but at least these later boos are optional if you don't care about score. As we make our way through the game, capturing all the boos and portrait ghosts along the way, we eventually run into Bogmire at the end of Area 2. He's easily the most forgettable part of the entire game. He just kind of shows up out of nowhere, his fight is really easy, and his design doesn't really match any of the other portrait ghosts or enemies throughout the mansion. He just doesn't have enough aura to stand up from the crowd in a cooler, unique way. He's washed. Put the fries in the bag. Mire. Boolossus is the boss of Area 3, and he actually does stand out, by being easily the most difficult fight in the game. He's pretty simple on paper, just split them up into smaller boos and then freeze them all and suck them up. But these boos have movement when there aren't many left. It's especially tricky because it's kinda hard to even tell where you're aiming the poltergust. Honestly, that's my biggest issue with the game in general is just depth perception, or lack thereof. I don't know if it's the angle that the camera is at, or that so many things are so tiny and flying all around the room super fast, or just the graphical effects making things look like they're closer than they actually are. But realistically, it's a combination of all three. It's annoying, but somewhat manageable when you're sucking things in like hearts and loose change on the ground. But the issue is that it's worst when fighting Boolossus, especially since the boos like to dart off screen so quickly and so often. The game tries to help a little bit by adding these sort of glowing drop shadows under certain things floating in the air, like the hearts and the elemental spirits, but it's inconsistent when it chooses to do this, and it doesn't actually help when trying to figure out what angle Luigi is actually pointing the poltergust at. Am I the only one that struggles with this? I feel like I barely see anyone talk about it, but it causes me to screw up multiple times every playthrough. I'm really curious if anyone else agrees. Leave a like and a comment below if you need cataract surgery. The final area of the game opens up with a bang. Well, more like a crash. A bolt of lightning strikes the mansion, putting it into a deep, dark blackout. This section of the game, though brief, is pretty unsettling. It feels awful to have all of your progress through the mansion wiped out like that, especially when previous safe havens are now littered with endlessly respawning ghosts. While I enjoy the oppressive atmosphere during this section, at the same time it's also a little bit frustrating that most of the actual challenge is outside of the player's control. Luigi freezes up in fear every time a ghost spawns near him, which is normally a cute little detail, but during the blackout causes him to get a good knuckles sandwich every time it happens just because he doesn't feel like getting a move on. This is also where the game's possibly most infamous moment takes place, and where I'm sure many a creepypasta was spawned. Because of a glitch or oversight in the lighting system, if Luigi is talking on the phone, A flash of lightning will make it look like his shadow is, hanging in the air, if you catch my drift. This is obviously not intentional, but it's another weird quirk in a game that in itself is just kind of one big weird quirk. It's weird, creepy, and fun to talk about and speculate on. In a way, it's almost like a microcosm of Luigi's Mansion as a whole. After finding Uncle Grimly and restoring power to the mansion, we're back to the standard routine. Area 4 is split half and half between the attic and the basement, and it's a bit of a chore going back and forth 3 flights of stairs between them pretty much every time we get a key. We can cut down on the backtracking a little bit by doing a secret trick where we can scan a mirror with the Game Boy Horror to teleport back to the foyer, but it doesn't help a ton. I love that we gain access to the sealed room by just dropping in down the chimney. At first it doesn't look like there's any way in since the door is, well, sealed up, but then you start to realize that no other door in the game is boarded up, so what gives? There's a few fake doors that are set up as traps, which I just found out that you can actually burn to destroy them. What? But no other sealed doors. It's very suspicious that we can't explore it on first glance. Well, it turns out that every room in the mansion can actually be explored, even the hidden room in the first floor hallway that has no visible entrances on the map. I'm always left a little disappointed when games have tons of decorative doors that never lead to anything, so the fact that Luigi's Mansion lets the player explore literally every room in the mansion makes it so much more fun to explore and imagine as a believable place that could exist. After exploring every other room in the mansion, all we're left with is the artist room in the attic, home of the final portrait ghost, Vincent van Gogh. EGAD has been warning us about him the entire game, being the source of all the standard ghosts throughout the mansion. We felt Vincent's presence for literally the entirety of the game. He's basically the secondary antagonist. I'm sure with all that buildup we'll have one hell of an excruciating challenge on our hand, and he's already dead. All he does is send groups of 3 of each enemy type out, one at a time. They're all bunched together when they spawn, so it's really easy to get them all in one suck even. Vincent himself doesn't put up much of a fight either, being one of the easiest portrait ghosts to wrangle. Luigi's Mansion is an easy game overall, but with all the build-up surrounding Vincent, I was hoping he'd be at least a little tricky. Regardless, after beating Vincent and capturing at least 40 boos, we can finally confront King Boo once and for all. After getting some more of this treasure here right quick. Hold on, Mario. These dollar bills can be so annoying sometimes. Just a sec. Okay, I just gotta wiggle around a little. The final boss against King Boo is pretty great, even if he's about as easy as Vincent was. Luigi gets sucked into Mario's painting by Bowser of all things, making his first and only appearance in the Luigi's Mansion series. Madame Clairvoyant foreshadows Bowser after collecting all of Mario's items, and she's surprised about it. She makes it sound like he's supposed to be dead, defeated for good. We are surrounded by fire and brimstone during the fight. Are we in hell? Okay, it's not actually Bowser, it's another one of King Boo's illusions, but it doesn't make it any less unsettling. The Bowser costume starts off being fairly believable, but we knock his head clean off and have to suck in King Boo while avoiding the floating head's ice attacks. I like that Bowser switches over from fire to ice attacks here, because, well, Bowser normally breathes fire, but as soon as the facade is dropped, Bowser's pupils go away and he starts attacking and behaving like a ghost, since ghosts are normally associated with the cold. Really freaky stuff, especially when you can hear his bones crack when he reattaches his head, and how he stumbles around with his head put on backwards. I wish the fight was a little more challenging, or that he had a few more attacks to add some variety, but they absolutely nailed the presentation. Speaking of which, I love this game's ending. Mario's painting gets put through EGAD's portraitificationizer machine in reverse, because of course it works like that. And it's just so fun to see a twist on this process that we became so familiar with over the course of the game. He gets ejected out of the machine in a super ridiculous and cartoony fashion, which is such a good contrast from the tone of the rest of the game. It shows that now that Luigi saved his brother, we're back to the typical wacky Super Mario antics we've come to expect from the series. This moment is really funny, but also really heartfelt. Luigi cries tears of joy when he sees Mario, happy and relieved that he was able to save his brother. Luigi is an emotional character. He suffered and put himself through so much shit to save Mario. It feels earned for him to finally be happy at the end. Once he sees Mario, he recognizes the absurdity of the situation and can't help but point and laugh at him. And if that isn't brotherly love, then I don't know what is. This ending makes me a little emotional. It's the perfect short and sweet end to a short and sweet game. And after absolutely jamming through the credits with that great funky beat, we see that while the mansion disappeared into the night, Luigi's cash didn't. EGAD builds a new mansion for Luigi using all the money that he collected, which I hope to God he set aside some of that money to pay property tax. The quality of the mansion is dependent on how much money Luigi collected, being ranked from A to H. If you collect less than $5 million to get the H rank, he just lives in a fucking tent. After my first playthrough, I collected somewhere along the lines of $97 million, which I thought was pretty damn good. But then I saw I got a B rank, and then the A rank is only at 100 million. Can you see where my affinity for replaying this game came from? It's like I had a third eye open to the possibilities and wonders of Luigi's Mansion. All of a sudden, every portrait ghost, every room, every piece of furniture were all opportunities for me to reach out and grab with my grubby capitalist hands. There's a bit more emphasis put on money in the original Luigi's Mansion than the other two games. It's actually a finite resource, and it consistently spawns in the exact same places in the exact same amounts every playthrough. There's all sorts of different types of coins and gold bars and diamonds, but my favorite are the dollar bills. There's just something about the way they flutter around and spiral into the poltergeist when they get sucked up that's just really satisfying to watch. The game tallies how much money the player collects at the end of each area, and it's just so satisfying to watch all those big, beautiful numbers rack up. Collecting money makes Luigi's Mansion an incredibly consistent and rewarding game to learn and master, not having to worry about any randomness to screw up any speedruns or high score attempts. Okay, well, there is randomness, mostly in whether you get hearts or money out of the props. And also these golden mice that have a small chance of appearing whenever you get close. But that's all very manageable and doesn't prevent you from getting that money from the whole playthrough, even if you have to fight the game for it a bit. This consistency even extends to the portrait ghosts. Each one drops 9 pearls, but they'll continue to drop bigger and bigger pearls the longer you're able to suck them in without breaking the streak. This not only gives the player more money with the more valuable pearls, but also upgrades the portrait frames in the gallery, giving a gold frame if we collect the biggest pearl. This is where the real challenge of Luigi's Mansion comes in, getting the most money from all the portrait ghosts. While none of them are that difficult to actually defeat just for the sake of beating the game, they become entirely different beasts in this context. Nana, Sir Weston, Mr. Lugs, Slim Backshots, even Jarvis all go from unassuming to unforgiving. But none of them hold a candle to the most difficult enemy in the entire game. Biff Atlas and his stupid ass barbell right in the middle of the room. This guy alone took more time to perfect the first time than probably every other portrait ghost combined. But as I keep playing the game, I get better at him, more consistent. And again, it's really amazing to see that development happen in real time. My strange analogy for the day is that Luigi's Mansion is basically the bowling of video games, even more than Wii Bowling. They're both short pickup games that can be played for fun without taking them too seriously, but both are also very consistent and entirely up to the player's own skill. It's even possible to have a perfect game of Luigi's Mansion by collecting every possible bit of money in the game and not taking any damage, just like it's possible to bowl a 300. Both games even have bowling balls. I rest my case. I'm quite proud of my current high score. It's good, but it's modest. Maybe one day I'll go for that coveted perfect score, and as long as I keep up my newly found Halloween tradition of playing Luigi's Mansion a couple times a year, I'm sure I'll get there someday. And before I return to my, crypt. There, that's spooky. Just to cover all my bases, I'll briefly talk about the 3DS version of Luigi's Mansion. No, not Dark Moon, I mean the remaster of the original game. Some people genuinely might not know that this version even exists. It came out so late in the 3DS's lifespan that the Switch had already been out for nearly a year and a half, and people were pretty quick to drop the 3DS once the Switch came out, and this game was no exception. I know development takes time, and it simply wouldn't have been possible or feasible to have it released any earlier, but it's just really unfortunate that so much manpower went into this game only to have barely anyone show interest in it. While Nintendo was creating the original, they actually experimented with stereoscopic 3D effects that would make the visuals pop out just like the 3DS, only 10 years earlier on more primitive hardware. They had this weird obsession with 3D back then, making all sorts of different systems and peripherals to support it spanning multiple decades. But that's an entirely different rabbit hole. The feature was eventually scrapped in the middle of development when they realized that nobody back then owned a 3D TV. Hell, nobody today has a 3D TV. But I think that little bit of history alone justifies the existence of the 3DS version. It's like a prophecy 16 years in the making. As for the game itself, it's a fine version of the game. It works. You can beat the game and have a decent time doing it, but it is definitely not my preferred way to play it. A big part of the appeal of the original was that dual-stick control scheme. The game was a tech demo meant to show off all the features that the GameCube had to offer, from the graphics all the way down to the controls themselves. The C-stick was how Luigi looked around and aimed his poltergust, and it's really crucial to the game's design to be able to use both sticks at the same time. The 3DS version has a few different solutions to try to get around this, but none of them are satisfactory. There are gyro controls to look up and down more easily, Splatoon style, but this doesn't help with turning left and right. The game supports the Circle Pad Pro, but I don't know if there's any human on Earth that has even used one before. If you have a new 3DS, the game is also compatible with that little C-nub thing in the corner, but my thumb is not compatible with that abomination. Seriously, anything being mapped to that thing other than camera controls instantly brings the game down like 2 letter grades for me. There's a good reason that Dark Moon completely reconfigured the gameplay to work on the 3DS. Speaking of which, there is also the option to use the strobe from Dark Moon, where we have to press A to stun the ghost instead of simply waving the flashlight around. But I swear it just doesn't work half the time. I'm pretty sure this is another case of me having trouble with depth perception, but like, come on! How did that not hit? Default controls it is. And no, the 3D doesn't help. So while the game is certainly playable and beatable on the 3DS, it's a fairly miserable time trying to get the gold ranks on any of the portrait ghosts, or trying to complete any of the achievements. Wait, yeah, achievements! Those are here too. I love collecting achievements, so this is a pretty great addition, but I just wish they weren't locked to this inferior version of the game. A lot of the more difficult ones require extraordinary levels of capital G gaming, including beating the game without dropping below 80 health, beating the game 9 times for all the different ending ranks, and getting the new platinum frames on the portrait ghosts. Yeah, this is a game I could see easily destroying my circle pad if I play it for much longer. I learned my lesson from Smash. Thanks for the offer, but I think I'll pass. You could emulate the game or mod your 3DS and play with an actual controller if you feel like dressing up as a pirate for Halloween, and this is the best way to play the game. But if I'm going to go through all the effort to find and decrypt the game files and get it up and running on my PC, even then I'd still rather just play the GameCube version at that point. I still find a lot of appeal in how weird and off the original version looks and feels to play, before they really ironed out and homogenized Mario's art style and game feel. The 3DS version is like this weird mix of both, with updated models but somehow not updated animations, and it just doesn't really do it for me. But I want to end this little mini review by pointing out that Grezzo legitimately did the best they could to bring this game onto the 3DS and update it for modern audiences, and for that I commend the effort. I want to reiterate that if you just want to play Luigi's Mansion just to beat the game once, and aren't interested in any of the challenge modes or anything, this is still pretty much the same game at its core. And at its core, Luigi's Mansion is such a cool and special game. Nintendo were out of their minds conceptualizing it, willing to throw caution to the wind and make their flagship launch title for their brand new system be some weird, quirky tech demo experiment that's only going to appeal to a very small subset of Mario fans. No, not that one, the other one. Nintendo put their all into Luigi's Mansion, and it shows. The world, or rather, the mansion of Luigi's Mansion, has so much love and care put into it. Every room is unique and packed with little details and secrets to find, and I love exploring it and seeing how it all comes together in the end. All the new characters are so charming and fun to interact with, and Luigi himself has been given so much depth to make him not only stand out from Mario, but to make him a great character that stands out in his own right. And underneath all that great theming and visual style is a rewarding, satisfying, mechanically deep game that's all about strategy and skill expression. Like I said, I've turned this game into a Halloween tradition, and I find myself coming back to it again and again, year after year, just trying to improve my high score little by little. I love that I'm still learning the best way to play it, that there's basically endless room for growth. Luigi's Mansion does a ton of great things to set it apart from not just every other Mario game, but from every other game in its own series. There really isn't any other game quite like it, quite frankly. Aside from Wii Bowling. I'm really glad I decided to come back to it after giving up on it all those years ago, and I think I'm going to keep coming back to it for years to come. Thank you, Luigi's Mansion, for being my second favorite in the series. Anyway, see you next year for Luigi's Mansion 2. Happy Halloween! Bye!
Are you guys going trick-or-treating?